When you look at where the Philadelphia Eagles stand right now, you can feel the atmosphere shift. It's as if every frame, every snap, and every conversation across the city carries the same question. Who are the Eagles at this moment? What was supposed to be just another game has turned into a turning point, one of those chapters that defines the direction, the confidence, and the destiny of an entire season. This Black Friday, against the Chicago Bears, it's not just a win on the line. It's the battle for the number 2 seed in the NFC, for respect, for answers after turbulent weeks, and, above all, for the identity of a team that understands the weight of the jersey it wears. Because today, this isn't just a matchup, it's pressure, it's expectation, it's history, it's the chance to silence the doubts, reignite the city, and show, once and for all, why the Philadelphia Eagles never back down from a defining moment. And before we dive in, hit that like button, because today we're going deep into what's really happening in Philadelphia. Fly, Eagles, fly! The conversation around this game doesn't start with Chicago's resurgence, even though that's been one of the league's biggest surprises. It starts with Philadelphia's ongoing struggle to look like the juggernaut everyone expected. 8 wins, 3 losses, and yet the vibe around the team feels nothing like what that record suggests. There's noise, frustration, and this lingering question of whether the issues we're seeing are just temporary growing pains with a new offensive coordinator or signs of a deeper imbalance. Kevin Patchelo has talent everywhere, an elite quarterback, a physical offensive line, explosive playmakers, but week after week the rhythm has been off, the flow inconsistent, the identity unclear. When a coach lacks feel as a play caller, it shows, and this season it has shown repeatedly. Last year the offensive line was the great equalizer, the foundation that allowed everything else to thrive. This season the drop-off has been impossible to ignore. Interior pressure has broken the timing of plays, disrupted the run game, and magnified every single mistake. You hear people wondering whether Saquon Barkley has lost a step, whether the workload last season wore him down, whether the Madden curse is real. But in reality, the numbers tell the truth. He hasn't had space. Repeated hits behind the line of scrimmage have turned simple runs into disasters, and there's no running back in the NFL who thrives when he's being contacted the moment he receives the ball. Explosive runs have evaporated, third downs have become heavier, and the entire offensive structure has lost the complementary balance it once had. And then come the penalties, the silent killers of momentum. This team has been one of the league's most penalized all season, and the timing has been brutal, wiping out explosive plays, stalling drives, flipping field position, and injecting frustration into both players and fans. One week it's a hold that turns a red zone trip into a punt. Another week it's a false start that takes the air out of a promising drive. Nick Sirianni always talks about mastering the details that take no talent, but right now the details are what's breaking them. The defensive struggles against Dallas made everything louder. A unit that had been playing well since the Jalen Phillips trade suddenly looked exposed, stretched, and a step behind against the high-powered offense. And now they face another explosive unit. The Bears generate big plays at one of the highest rates in the NFL. They're confident, they're fast, and under Ben Johnson, they're aggressive from the first whistle to the last. That's what makes this matchup dangerous. Chicago doesn't have the pressure. Philadelphia does. Chicago is playing with nothing to lose. Philadelphia is playing with everything to protect. This is the moment where fans want to see the response. Is this team willing to adjust? Will Sirianni and Patchelo finally show more aggressiveness? Will Jalen Hurts, who has been statistically brilliant but visually inconsistent, shift into that takeover mode that made him one of the most feared players in football? Can this offensive line find something, anything, to stabilize the trenches long enough to let the playmakers breathe? Because this isn't just a game. It's a temperature check on a season that has been a roller coaster of expectations. Lose this one, and the noise becomes deafening. Win it, and the Eagles reclaim control of the narrative heading into the final stretch. Sliding into this second half of the story, the tone around the Eagles becomes even more urgent, because what happens next will shape not just the rest of the season but the fan base's confidence in everything this team has built. When you zoom out, you see a roster loaded with talent, a coaching staff with playoff experience, and a quarterback whose record when protecting the football is elite. But when you zoom in, snap by snap, series by series, you see the cracks that have allowed lesser opponents to stick around and stronger opponents to take control. And that's exactly why this matchup with Chicago feels like a moment of truth rather than just another game on the schedule. Philadelphia's conservative offensive identity worked when a team could rely on trench dominance and flawless execution. But this year, playing it safe has turned into playing not to lose, and that's a dangerous place to be when facing a young, fast, confident Bears team that refuses to back down. The conversation about identity matters because when you go up 21-0 like they did against Dallas and then fail to score for more than 40 minutes, it exposes the limits of that approach. You can feel the shift in momentum, the sense that the coaching staff is tightening up instead of stepping on the gas, and every fan watching could sense that collapse becoming more likely by the minute. That's the part that sticks. That's the part fans can't shake. Chicago won't fold in that situation, and everyone knows it. Ben Johnson has his offense programmed to stay aggressive deep into the fourth quarter, and Caleb Williams, despite his inaccuracy streaks, is fearless. What makes this even more challenging is that he doesn't turn the ball over. He'll miss 3 or 4 throws a game that could have changed drives, but he rarely puts the ball in harm's way. That is exactly the kind of quarterback who can frustrate a defense and keep pressure on an offense that's already struggling to find a rhythm. On the Eagles' side, every storyline loops back to the offensive line. That unit has always been the heartbeat of the team, the engine that allowed Hurts to be patient, that allowed the deep shots to develop, that allowed the run game to wear teams down. This year, the beating heart is out of sync. Lane Johnson being sidelined in this matchup only magnifies the concern. You can't underestimate how much that changes the structure of the offense or how much it opens the door for a defender like Montez Sweat, who has been heating up over the last 6 weeks. These one-on-one matchups carry real weight in games that could swing on a single drive. And then there's the bigger emotional layer that every Eagles fan understands. Losing this game isn't just about a number in the standings, it's about the pressure cooker that is Philadelphia sports. Back-to-back losses, especially one at home on a short week, would ignite the fan base in a way that would dominate the rest of the season. Calls for Kevin Patchelow's job would get louder. The questions about Nick Sirianni's approach would snowball. Even if Sirianni has earned the benefit of the doubt, even if his track record proves he knows how to win close games, the impatience of this city doesn't tolerate stalled ambition. This is a franchise built to contend for another Super Bowl. Anything less than steady progression hits harder here. But if they win, everything shifts. A victory resets the energy in the building, gives the coaching staff breathing room, and shows the rest of the NFC that the Eagles still know how to rise in the heavy moments. It reinforces the identity they're trying to rediscover and proves that the Dallas loss was a stumble, not a spiral. That's why this game feels like a defining chapter instead of a footnote, because success or failure here says something about who this team truly is in 2025 and where they're going. Picking things up right where we left off, the pressure surrounding this Eagles team becomes even more fascinating when you realize how much of their identity has been built on winning the turnover battle and closing out tight games. That's been their backbone under Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Protect the football, force mistakes, and trust your talent to finish the job. And the numbers don't lie. When the Eagles win the turnover margin, Sirianni is nearly unbeatable. Hurts is nearly untouchable. That combination has defined the entire era. But this season, that margin for error has shrunk dramatically. When the offense becomes stagnant, when penalties stall promising drives, when the run game can't create space and the line can't hold long enough for the deep game to develop, every possession becomes heavier. And when your opponent is a team like Chicago, explosive, aggressive, efficient, and committed to pushing the pace, you feel that weight even more. What stands out in this matchup is how dramatically it contrasts the emotional state of these two teams. Chicago is ascending. They're confident. They've won close games. They trust their coaching. And even though Caleb Williams still has accuracy issues, everything he does is trending upward. He plays within structure more consistently. His sack avoidance has been outstanding. And even when he misses, he's seeing the field correctly. That alone keeps the Bears in every game. Philadelphia, on the other hand, isn't lacking talent, they're lacking cohesion. They're lacking the smooth, rhythmic sequencing that once made their offense feel inevitable. And when a team loses that sense of inevitability, every mistake feels magnified, every decision is second-guessed, and every game becomes a referendum on the coaching staff. That's why this matchup carries a different kind of gravity. The Bears come in with confidence and nothing to lose. The Eagles walk in with expectations and everything to prove. A win resets the tone, reestablishes control, and buys this team breathing room before a tough stretch. A loss, though, pours gasoline on every criticism, from Patchelow's play calling to the offensive line's regression to the team's growing inconsistency in the clutch. And that's what makes this game so compelling, because it's not just about one Friday afternoon on a national stage. It's about what comes after. It's about what this team decides to be when the pressure climbs and the eyes of the league are locked in. If you're still with me, now I want to hear from you. Do you think the Eagles will punch back and steady the season? Or Or are we seeing deeper problems that this team won't be able to outrun? And stepping back for one final reflection, what makes all of this so gripping is the contrast between expectation and reality. The Eagles entered this season with the weight of being defending champions, a roster built for another deep run, and the continuity that most teams envy. But as we saw in every segment of that discussion, winning in the NFL is never just about talent. It's about timing, momentum, discipline, health, matchups, and confidence. It's about whether the offense can find rhythm when it needs it most, whether the defense can withstand surges from explosive opponents, and whether the coaching staff can adapt when old formulas don't deliver the same results. Chicago is arriving with momentum and an identity that is forming at exactly the right time. Philadelphia is stepping into this matchup with pressure, scrutiny, and the challenge of proving they can recalibrate in the middle of the storm. And that's why the atmosphere around this game feels like something more than just a Week 13 showdown. It's a moment that could tilt the emotional landscape of the entire season. Because if the Eagles take this moment, assert themselves, and show that they can adjust when challenged, then the narrative resets. Fans regain trust, the team regains direction, and the path toward another postseason push stays intact. But if they stumble again, if penalties, conservative stretches, offensive inconsistency or trench breakdowns resurface, the noise becomes something this team can no longer ignore. Because Philadelphia is not a city where losing twice in a row goes unnoticed. It's a city that demands urgency, resilience, and response. So as we step into this massive Friday matchup, everything we've discussed, play calling flow, offensive line struggles, penalties, conservative tendencies, and the explosive potential of the opponent, collides into one moment that will define where the Eagles truly stand. With all that said, I want to throw it back to you one more time. What's your gut feeling heading into this game? Do the Eagles rise to the challenge, or do the same concerns we've analyzed come back to haunt them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out the video on screen for your next deep dive into everything Eagles. And as we extend this conversation even further, it becomes impossible to ignore just how emotionally complex this moment is for Eagles fans. Because deep down, everyone watching knows this team is capable of so much more than what they've shown in recent weeks. That's the source of the frustration. It isn't hopelessness, it's expectation. It's knowing that this roster, even with its inconsistencies, has already won on the biggest stage and has proven it can rise when the lights are brightest. And that history sits in the back of every fan's mind as they weigh the concerns against the potential. All season, we've seen flashes of what this team can be. We've seen moments where Jalen Hurts looks like the same calm, decisive, turnover-proof leader who carved his way through the league. We've seen the defense deliver stretches of dominance, especially after the Jalen Phillips addition, that made it feel like the unit was on the verge of becoming a real strength again. We've seen the red zone efficiency reach #1 in the league, proof that when this team gets close, it still knows how to finish. And that's what makes this upcoming matchup feel less like a prediction and more like a test of consistency, a test of whether this team can embody its best self long enough to win a game that truly matters. The Bears are not walking in intimidated. Their young core, their explosive tendencies, their newfound coaching stability, all of it gives them the confidence to swing freely. But Philadelphia has something Chicago doesn't yet have: scars. Battle-tested scars. Hard-earned scars. The kind of scars that come from deep playoff games, from tense December runs, from nights where everything looked shaky until someone stepped up and took control. That's why fans are torn between worry and belief, because they've seen this team dig deep and find answers before. And now the question becomes, do they have one more answer in them? Can the offensive line steady itself just enough to allow Hurts to settle in? Can the coaching staff break out of the conservative shell long enough to let their talent breathe? Can the team avoid the penalties and self-inflicted wounds that have stalled so many drives this season? And can they match, or exceed, the aggression they're about to face? These aren't small questions. These are the questions that shape a season. Because this game, on this stage, with this much on the line, will reveal something real about who the Eagles are right now. Not who they used to be, not who they're supposed to be, but who they actually are today. And at this point, with everything swirling around this matchup, I want you to weigh in once more. Do you believe the Eagles' playoff-tested experience will outweigh Chicago's momentum, or is this game going to expose more of the cracks we've been talking about? And the more you think about everything surrounding this matchup, the more it becomes clear that this isn't just about X's and O's anymore. It's about the emotional pulse of the fan base, the psychological state of the locker room, and the narrative pressure surrounding a team that isn't used to being questioned like this. When a team with the Eagles' pedigree drops a game in the fashion they did against Dallas, it lingers. It hangs over every press conference, every film session, every rep in practice. Not because the season is collapsing, the record is still strong, but because teams with championship expectations are judged differently. Every flaw becomes magnified. Every trend becomes a warning sign. Every missed opportunity becomes a talking point. That's what amplifies this moment. The inconsistencies aren't theoretical anymore. They're visible, repeated, and now heading into a matchup against a team that thrives off those exact weaknesses. Chicago's explosiveness matches up directly with one of the areas where the Eagles have struggled most, giving up chunk plays off play action. Their aggressive mentality targets the exact conservative stretches that have stalled this offense late in games, and their confidence contrasts sharply with the sense of frustration that has begun forming around Philadelphia's play calling and offensive rhythm. But the difference, and this is crucial, is that the Eagles have been here before. They've played in these pressure pockets. They've dealt with noise, criticism, doubt, and expectation. Their core players have lived through seasons where every week felt like a referendum, and that experience matters when a team is searching for stability. When a team has built such a strong record by thriving in tight, high-pressure moments, you can never fully count them out. That's why even in the middle of this turbulence, there's still a sense that this team can flip a switch, recalibrate, and remind everyone why they've been one of the most successful organizations in recent years. But for that to happen, it requires something they haven't found consistently this season: clean football, discipline, rhythm, identity. The penalties have to stop taking points off the board. The offensive line has to stabilize long enough to give the scheme its structure back. The play calling has to move with purpose instead of caution. And the defense has to avoid giving life to an opponent that feeds off momentum. It all funnels into this exact moment: a short week, a national stage, a desperate opponent with nothing to lose, and a contender with everything to prove. Games like this expose teams. They either reveal cracks or reveal character. And for the Eagles, it's not an exaggeration to say this matchup could dictate the tone of the stretch run. So as we push this conversation forward, let me put it back on you once again. Do you believe this is the week the Eagles reestablish who they are, or is this pressure about to create even more questions as the season gets tighter? For that to happen, it requires something they haven't found consistently this season: clean football, discipline, rhythm, identity. The penalties have to stop taking points off the board. The offensive line has to stabilize long enough to give the scheme its structure back. The play calling has to move with purpose instead of caution. And the defense has to avoid giving life to an opponent that feeds off momentum. It all funnels into this exact moment: a short week, a national stage, a desperate opponent with nothing to lose, and a contender with everything to prove. Games like this expose teams. They either reveal cracks or reveal character. And for the Eagles, it's not an exaggeration to say this matchup could dictate the tone of the stretch run. So as we push this conversation forward, let me put it back on you once again. Do you believe this is the week the Eagles reestablish who they are, or is this pressure about to create even more questions as the season gets tighter?